Now you may recognise these measurements from a previous video when we took a look at a log periodic antenna that I picked up off eBay, and it was pretty good on the network analyzer. So as I said in that video, I thought we'd have a go at making one for ourselves. Now the primary materials that we're going to be using to build this is some aluminium bar here. This is 3mm thick and 10mm wide. I bought a metre of it, and I've cut off two lengths here and here that are 300mm long, and that's going to give us more than enough length to build the elements onto. And I've also got some 6mm diameter aluminium tubing here with a 1.1mm inside wall. Now to start off with, what I've done, I've found the centre line down one of the aluminium bars that I've cut to 300mm, and we're going to start measuring 10mm in from this end, and we're going to start with the measurements right at the end of the log periodic first. So I've got my line here, so I'm going to start measuring from that line. To make it a little bit easier, I've cut out a piece, just a piece of PCB board at a 6mm width, because these measurements are taken from the insides of each element. So each element, that's where the measurement is, in between these two measurements here. So my little piece of PCB, what's that going to do? It's going to help me. I can butt it up against that line that I've just made, draw a line down there, and then I'm going to put a drill mark where I'm going to be drilling a hole in the center of this line. So I've got my mark there, which is the center. That's where I'm going to drill the hole for the first element. So now I need to measure off 15mm to the second element. So I'm just going to place my ruler up against that black mark and then draw another line just here. And again, take my little measuring tool here and draw a line like so. So my second element, I need to put a mark in the middle here, and that's the mark for the second element. I just need to work my way all the way down the boom until I've got all the marks marked off. So now that I've got all the drill holes marked out on this side of the iron bar, it's time to flip it over and do the measurements for the second set of elements on the opposite side. Now I've already gone ahead here and drawn a line where I want my elements to start from, just like I did on this side, so I've just continued that over. And I've also drawn a line using my little measuring tool, so that's where the element on the opposite side starts from. So if you look at my measurements here, I have made an error on the original PDF, and I will re-upload a new one, but because I'm measuring from this side, the end of the boom, instead of the opposite end, which I originally, when I worked this out, I've added this in. This is 5mm, and that 5mm is the distance from this element here, the edge of that element, to the starting edge of the element on the opposite side. So we need to measure 5mm there, drill the hole, and then we can start measuring off using these measurements on the opposite side of the boom. So now that I've got that line 5mm in, I can use my little element measuring tool here, offer that up, draw the line there and find the middle, and that's where I want my drill hole to be on the opposite side. And I've just realised I haven't put a centre line down on this side. So that's better. I've got my centre line down here now, and there where the cross is, that's where I need to drill the hole for the 4mm screw to hold the element on this side of the boom. So now that I've done that, it's pretty straightforward now. I just need to measure 20mm to the start of the second element on the opposite side, draw a line here and use my measuring tool, and then use these measurements and work myself all the way down the rest of the boom. So I've got all my holes ready to drill, marked off on each side of the boom there, and what I'm hoping, because this is just a mirror image of the second boom, we can just use this as a template to drill our holes into the second boom. So now I've got all the holes drilled into the first boom. What I can do now is get some double-sided tape, put some double-sided tape on the second boom, and then stick them both together and use the first boom as a template to drill the holes in the second one. Now I've got them stuck together with double-sided tape, but one thing to note about this, I'm just going to basically mark the holes with the drill bit. I'm not going to go all the way through, because I've found with aluminium, because of the heat transfer with aluminium, it can soften up the tape and basically can start moving around. So it's best to just just touch the drill bit down each hole and just mark it, and then you can remove it and then drill all the way through. So next we're going to move on to making the elements out of the aluminium tubing. Now I've decided to connect these elements using M4 screws, and I'm also cutting the elements to size using a plumber's pipe cutter, only because I like the way it finishes off the ends, and you can see this is one I've already made. It gets that nice finish on the end there, and also because this is the side where I've tapped it out. This is 6mm diameter tubing with just a little bit over a 1mm wall, and that's just enough to cut some threads into the inside of the aluminium tubing. But because I use a pipe cutter, as you can see here, it squashes a little bit more material around here, so when we're starting off cutting, it gives us a bit more material to grab onto, and it really makes for a more secure connection. So we're going to do that first, but what you have to do first when you get your tubing, it's flat obviously like this. On one end I just cut a small section off the end just so we can start off with that nice shape that it gives you. So before we cut it to length, I like to cut the threads out, just because we've got a lot more material to hold down in the vise. So you want to protect the tubing so it doesn't get gnarled in any way. And with the vise holding it, you just want to start off just really slowly. I mean, it's aluminium, it's really soft, so it's really easy to cut out the threads. I haven't had to use much oil with this at all, but once you get it started, keeping it as straight as possible. And there you can see on the end we've got some nice threads going on in there. Now, as I said, I'm going to use this little pipe cutter to cut the aluminium tubing, but because this is a really cheap one off of eBay, in fact I'm using this more and more, so I think it's time to get a more expensive one. But it doesn't run true when you're cutting out a piece of pipe. So what I do is I take it over to the bandsaw and just kind of put a groove in there, just a track to help guide the cutting wheel on this, so I get a nice even cut. I've also used a hacksaw and a Dremel to do that as well. So now that I've got my groove cut around here, it just helps to guide this little cutting wheel in here. You can see how it moves around in there. It really is just a cheap one off eBay. You probably won't have to go through this process if you've got a more expensive one. Now, once you've got all your elements cut and tapped out, you're much easier to work on one at a time. Lay your elements out in size like I have here, and then just start screwing them onto the boom. I may remove these again because, as I said, I haven't built one of these yet, so I'm kind of making it up as I go along. So I may need to drill some more holes in the boom, so I may have to remove some of these, but it'll give me a nice idea of how this comes together. And you can see, you know, because they're tapped out and screwed, very easy to take apart and disassemble. Now, before I proceed any further, I think I've already got in my head how I'm going to connect up the coax or anything, but there's still some bits I want to do on the booms before we move on. Basically, one thing is I want to work out a way to be able to solder the coax to the end of these booms here. But what I want to cover next is how I'm going to connect up the back here. I want to design this so it uses clips like these, because most people would want to attach this on the outside of their house. So I want to work out how I'm going to basically terminate the booms here and then create something here that we can mount onto a small pole. Remember, the log periodic does not have a back reflector. I've seen some papers recently where people have investigated the benefits of adding a reflector to a log periodic antenna to give it some more forward gain, but most of the time they do not have a back reflector. Now, I've left myself quite a bit of room on the start of the boom here, as I said at the beginning, and what I'm thinking of doing is putting a right angle bend in these and attaching it to a piece of aluminium bar like this one here. Trying to work out in my head how to do that, so what I think I'm going to do is do a drawing on here and get it set in my mind and cut something out, and hopefully then you'll see the solution that I've come up with. So I'm pretty happy how this has worked out. One thing to note is, because this is the first time I've built this, you need to be really careful when bending the aluminiums with these right angle bends, because where you've drilled a hole for the first element here, that's a potential weak point. But as long as you realise that when you're bending it, it's not too much of a problem. But basically, I'm just going to be fitting them on to that back plate, either riveting them or fixing them with some kind of screws. But now I've got to work on the rest of the element, and then we can bolt it to this. Now, I've been making quite a bit of progress here. What I've done is I've tapped and screwed a screw in the end, and that will enable me to solder coax directly on the screw. I'm just going to file it down so we've got a good surface and add solder to that. So that's one problem that we've overcome. The second problem is how to feed the coax. Basically, I want to feed the coax up the center there, and what I've done for that is I've made these little runners here. One it's kind of offset in the middle, they're not equal, so this one will fit and glue directly onto the boom, and we can see that like so, like that one. The top one has got a little bit more room in it, so I can feed some coax down there, and then what I can do is glue the top directly onto that, and that'll help protect and guide the coax along there. It will also make it look a little bit tidier. So I'm pretty happy with the way this is coming together, and certainly you know, attaching the elements using the screws has made this build a lot easier to take apart as we go along. But I'm happy with these spacers now, so I'm going to remove this top boom, then feed the coax through there, and then solder it on to the two screws here that I've already pre-tinned at the ends, and then virtually it's finished then. And those little screws have turned out really well, and if you look at the end of here, you can see where I made a mistake on this one. I drilled a hole first in the middle, just like I did with this one, but it broke off, so I had to drill one slightly to the side, as you can see. But I would have been better off doing that on both of them, just to make doubly sure that I don't short this out in any way. But yeah, it's turned out well on the end there. Now I've got everything together, but to finish it off I want to make an end cap for this here. So I've got some plastic here, cut it to the length that I want. I've glued on a little piece there, and basically I'm just going to glue this onto there. I'm going to use this to help support it while the super glue sets, but then I'm going to have an end cap that will go over the top of there. Now, I was just setting this up over on the test bench, and I virtually was ready to go to calibrate the network analyzer, but then some of you playing along at home may have realised that I'd forgot about the impedance tab that goes just about there. Yep, sorry. So here it is on the test setup. I've got it hooked up to the network analyzer. You can see the little impedance tab in place now, but we're seeing something very interesting over on the network analyzer, so let's take a look at that. Now I'm scanning from 400 megahertz over here all the way up to 4 gigahertz. Now you can see we've got a nice dip round about here. That is about 1 gigahertz there. We've got a basically it works well from around here, dips down at 1 gigahertz, and again we've got this wide frequency of operation here and then this big dip here, but this is unusual. This is a carbon copy of the one I picked up off eBay that you saw a couple of videos ago. The only difference is that I've manufactured mine out of aluminium and aluminium tubes for the elements, where the other one is just pressed steel, and the one from eBay claimed to go all the way up to about 2.7 gigahertz, but you can see here it starts dipping around 2.3 gigahertz there, all the way down to a lovely dip at 2.5 gigahertz, and then it starts to go back up again, but it's still working well at around 2.7 2.6 gigahertz, and that's what the one off eBay claimed to work at, but it didn't. It stopped at around 2.4 gigahertz, so we're getting a lovely dip in this area here that we didn't get with the one purchased off eBay. But again, you know, the only thing I've done differently is I've used tubing and aluminium instead of the pressed steel, but again it's a lovely antenna. So I'm really pleased how this turned out, and yeah, a very nice frequency response further up in the band that we didn't get on the original eBay one. And as I said, the only thing I can think of is the different materials that I've used, because it is a carbon copy of that one. And yes, I did forget the impedance tab there. I've got it held in place with 2 little screws there. That's come together quite nicely. As I said, if I wanted to completely dismantle this, it'd be very easy to do so. And basically a log periodic is an interesting antenna because it's just an array of half-wave vertical dipoles, each one half a wave, quarter wave here and a quarter wave here. So we've got all these dipole antennas all for different frequencies, and that's how you can get that nice bandwidth across the spectrum then there. It's you know, a really interesting way of doing that. And if you just wanted to concentrate on the upper band in the 2 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz, you could just make one without these elements here and possibly these here, concentrate on these and make a few smaller ones coming out of there, so it would be a very small antenna and it'll work up in those higher frequencies. And again, if you wanted to have it working much further lower down, you could start at these elements here and make some bigger ones going back this way, and you'd have one that works on the sub 1 gigahertz frequencies. It's a really nice antenna to have a go at building. And because they are all dipole antennas, that's why it's really important to have that impedance tab there or some kind of balun to make it work properly. But yeah, an interesting antenna. And you can see here I've got the eBay one, and it's virtually, it is identical, at least the sizes of those elements are. It's just that this one's made out of pressed steel and mine isn't, so you know, that's probably accounting for that slightly different frequency response, especially higher up. And if you are interested in having a go at building these, then I would suggest you hop over to the antennas group on Facebook. Sven, one of the users over there, has uploaded some really nice images of a log periodic he's working on, but he's making his etched onto PCB board, a really nice log periodic over there. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I've included all the important bits so you can have a go at building one of these. I will upload a new PDF with those couple of measurements that I missed off on the original one, but I just went off the measurements that I took on that PDF and managed to build this, so you shouldn't have any problems at all. Any comments or questions, drop them below. I'll do my best to answer them, and if you want to pop over to the Antennas Facebook group, you're more than welcome. If you do like what I do and you want to help support the channel, then please think about Patreon, and yeah, that all gets put back into the channel to do more builds and buy equipment and materials. And yeah, if you got any comments or questions, drop them below, and hopefully you'll join me on the next one.